We met for the first time, and when he put on that fedora and he strung on that whip, he gave shape and attitude and style and vulnerability. I owe Harrison a great personal debt.
Steven Spielberg was sitting in a dark screening room, watching one of the most disturbing films ever made. Across from him sat the man who made it, Stanley Kubrick. The movie was The Shining, and Spielberg didn't love it. He turned to Kubrick and said something bold, something most people would never dare say to a director's face. He said Jack Nicholson's performance felt too big, too wild, almost theatrical, like something pulled from a stage play instead of a movie. Kubrick didn't argue. He didn't defend his actor. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he asked one question, a question that would trap Spielberg completely, quickly, without thinking. Who are your 5 favorite actors of all time? No pause, no warning. Just answer, and Spielberg did. 5 names fired off in seconds, but here's the twist nobody saw coming. Not one of those 5 names had ever worked with him. Not Harrison Ford, not Tom Hanks, not Daniel Day-Lewis, not Leonardo DiCaprio, the man who built some of the biggest movie stars in modern history. Didn't pick a single one of them, and that wasn't even the strangest part. What Kubrick said next would completely change how Spielberg judged that performance, and expose something about himself he never saw coming. This is the story of a 5-second answer that fans are still talking about, decades later. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand who Steven Spielberg really is. He isn't just a director. He's the closest thing modern cinema has to a living legend. Over 5 decades, he's made more than 30 films: Jaws, E.T. Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, films that didn't just entertain people. They shaped childhoods, defined summers, changed how the world remembered history itself. Multiple Academy Awards, global box office records, and along the way, he worked with an almost unbelievable list of talent. Harrison Ford, Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, Liam Neeson, Daniel Day-Lewis, Leonardo DiCaprio. These weren't just actors passing through his films. In many cases, Spielberg made them stars. So naturally, fans assumed they already knew the answer to one simple question. If you asked Spielberg who his favorite actors were, of course he'd name the people he built his empire with, right? That was the image. Spielberg discovers talent. Spielberg elevates talent. Spielberg's favorites are obviously his own collaborators, but there was a private conversation nobody knew about for years. 2 of the greatest filmmakers alive, sitting quietly after a screening, talking honestly instead of performing for cameras, and in that unguarded moment, something didn't match the image at all. No time to think about optics. No time to think about loyalty to the actors who made him famous. What came out of his mouth revealed a side of Spielberg the public had never seen. A side shaped not by Hollywood, but by the movies he fell in love with as a kid, long before he ever picked up a camera. This is where it really begins. It all started with that screening of The Shining. In the early 1980s, Kubrick wanted an honest reaction. No audience, no critics, just one filmmaker's opinion, given directly to another, and Spielberg gave it. He told Kubrick that Nicholson's performance felt over the top. Too big for the screen. He compared it to Japanese kabuki theater, a style built on exaggerated expression and larger-than-life energy. It wasn't meant as an insult. It was an artistic critique. But it was still a bold thing to say to the man who directed the film. Kubrick didn't push back. He didn't defend himself. Instead, he asked a question designed to make a point. Name your 5 favorite actors of all time. Quickly. Don't think about it. It sounded simple. It wasn't. Kubrick wasn't just curious. He was setting a trap, built entirely around what Spielberg would reveal about himself in that one unguarded second. Spielberg didn't hesitate. 5 names almost instantly. Spencer Tracy, Henry Fonda, Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, Clark Gable. Legends from a completely different era of film, decades before Spielberg ever stepped onto a set of his own. At first, it seems harmless. Just a director naming actors he admires. But what happened next turned this simple question into something far more revealing. Kubrick stopped him immediately. Where was James Cagney on that list? Spielberg paused. He hadn't included Cagney, an actor known for explosive, high-energy performances, the kind of acting that demanded attention. And that's when things took a sharp turn. Kubrick pointed out something Spielberg hadn't considered. Cagney belonged in that conversation, even though his style was intense, theatrical, larger than life. Almost exactly the kind of performance Spielberg had just criticized in Nicholson. The entire conversation flipped in an instant. This wasn't a fun trivia question anymore. It was an argument. If Spielberg respected Cagney's boldness as legendary, why was he dismissing that same boldness in Nicholson? It was quiet. It was devastating. And it left Spielberg with something he couldn't easily shake off. But there's a deeper layer to this moment that almost nobody caught right away. Not one of the 5 actors he named had ever appeared in one of his own films. Not Harrison Ford, the face of Indiana Jones. Not Tom Hanks, his most frequent leading man. Not Liam Neeson, star of Schindler's List. His true instinctive answer pulled from a completely different era. Actors from the golden age of Hollywood, long before Spielberg was even born. It revealed something the public never expected. His image was built on modern collaborations, modern stars. But his personal taste, the one that surfaced instantly under pressure with no time to filter it, belonged to a generation entirely different from his own. And that raised a bigger question fans are still asking today. If none of his own leading men made the list, what does that really say about how Spielberg sees his own legacy? This is where the story hits its real turning point. On the surface, it looks like a simple exchange between 2 friends. But look closer, and it becomes something far more revealing. A rare, unfiltered glimpse into how one of the greatest directors alive actually thinks about performance. Spielberg spent his entire career building stars. He turned Harrison Ford into an action icon. He gave Tom Hanks some of his most respected roles. He helped launch Leonardo DiCaprio into an entirely new chapter of his career. And yet, forced to answer honestly, with 0 time to filter his response. None of them came to mind first. That's the part that stunned fans when this story quietly resurfaced online years later. It wasn't disrespect. Spielberg has praised these actors publicly again and again throughout his career. It was something far more human than that. Underneath the awards, underneath the box office records, underneath decades of fame, Spielberg was still, at his core, a kid who fell in love with movies by watching a completely different generation of actors on screen. His instinctive answer wasn't shaped by Hollywood politics. It was shaped by childhood memories, black and white films, matinee idols, the actors who made him fall in love with cinema long before he ever dreamed of directing a single frame himself. And that's exactly why Kubrick's question worked so well. He didn't just get an answer, he got the truth. So what does all of this really mean? When this story eventually reached fans and film lovers everywhere, the reaction was intense. People were genuinely stunned that legends like Harrison Ford and Tom Hanks didn't make the cut. Conversations spread online, comparing Spielberg's own filmography to the list he gave in private, trying to make sense of the gap between the stars he created and the actors he personally idolized. But the more people sat with it, the more it started to make sense. Spielberg wasn't ranking the best performances in his own movies. He was answering a far more personal question. Who shaped him? Before he ever became Steven Spielberg, the filmmaker. Before Jaws, before E.T., before any of it. There's something almost comforting in that. Even someone who reached the very top of Hollywood, who directed some of the most successful films in history, still carries the same instinct fans do. A deep, personal love for the movies and actors that came before him. But here's the part that makes this story worth remembering. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a public feud. It was 2 masters of their craft, being completely honest with each other, in private, and that honesty is exactly why, decades later, people still can't stop talking about it. Today, Spielberg is still working, still directing, still one of the most respected filmmakers alive. His bond with actors like Tom Hanks has only grown stronger with time, spanning multiple films and decades of trust. But that quiet moment with Kubrick remains one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes stories in Hollywood. Not because it exposed a scandal, but because it exposed something real, a director's true personal taste, revealed in 5 unscripted seconds. Sometimes the most powerful moments in Hollywood aren't the loud ones. They're the quiet ones, the ones nobody was ever supposed to hear. So what do you think? Were you surprised that Spielberg's favorite actors list didn't include a single person he's actually worked with? Would your own list look completely different from the people you're known for? Drop your own top 5 favorite actors of all time in the comments. We want to see who makes your list. And if you love stories like this, real, surprising moments pulled from Hollywood history, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.